Dear audience, hope you would be fine in this short video. Today we would be talking about modernism. Actually, a lot of my students ask me the question about the major difference between modernism and the postmodernism. So they are very much confused about differentiating the movement of modernism and postmodernism in the literature, and about the characteristics of the literature which was written about the modernism and the postmodernism. For example, it is very difficult for a student of English literature to locate any text into and categorically into a era as whether it is a belongs to the time of movement of modernism or to the that of the postmodernism. For example, if we talk about Samuel Beckett waiting for Godot, so this text was written in 1960s, and we place that movement, that play into the category of modernism. While if we talk about that the movements, the time of the movement, that it starts from the 1920s to 1960s. So, what are the characteristics of a text which can make or place him, can help the critic and the reader to place that text into the into the category or the movement of modernism or of that of postmodernism? So it's very tricky one. Therefore, today in this video I would be talking on only modernism. In my next video I would be talking on postmodernism, and in our third video we would be talking about the difference between modernism and the postmodernism. So before that, going to our discussion, I would just make you mention that the literary period or the period after 1900 to 1960, we call it as the modern period in English literature, and this is also what is termed as modernism as well. If we talk or look at the history of Great Britain, from 1832 to 1900, there was the Queen Victoria, and that period in the English literature is considered as very much of that domestic period. It is very mixture. It was the age of invention as well. It was, but however, it was more focused with that of the reality. It was though it has seen developing the new realities, but somehow it centered around the reality. There was a belief on that of the reality. There was a belief, though Matthew Arnold has been talking about that the faith has lost, faith has gone, this faith has been done with this one in his poems as well. Even Tennyson has been talking about the loss of faith, degenerating concept in the faith as well. But somehow it was very traditional in its uh, dealing with the reality, dealing with the faith, dealing with the science, and all that, dealing with the citizenship, law, all that. Means during this period, England has been passing through the conventional and some sort of traditional values, traditional passage. I may call it as a passage. Means, for example, culture was producing, passing through the traditional canons or the channels. Science was processing through the traditional channels. Reality was passing through the traditional and conventional challenges. But in the after the death of the Queen Victoria in 1900, the word shift into a new word, and that word was the word of experiment. That word was the experimenting new word. it was basically a reaction. I mean, modernism was a reaction against that traditional values which has been practiced in Victorian period. So we see this movement in our literature in the end of that 19th century and at the early of the 20th century. Means it started from 1900 to 1960s, majorly in the North America and in the Central Europe. So modernism makes a strong and deliberate break from the traditional style of prose and poetry. Means new methods has been developed and introduced and talked in the both prose and in the poetry. The horrors of the First World War and the changing ideas about the reality developed by the prominent figures like Charles Dickens, Survival of the Fittest, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, they were illustrated, and the need of the prevailing assumption about the society were to be readdressed. Means in this period, man was unable to decide between the science, between the reason and the faith. So modernism basically talked about dragging the man into the modern ideas. If uh, Charles Dickens was talking about, sorry, Karl Marx was talking about the money and the survival of the fittest, and similarly, Charles Darwin was talking about the survival of the fittest. Then, at the same time, we see that Matthew Arnold was talking about that of the conscience, about that word of the inner word. So, modernist writers experimented with new forms and the styles. Basically, modernism is the experimentation of the new styles. So, satire, irony, stream of unconscious interior monologue, the use of multiple point of views, and the comparison between the other popular literary techniques. Uh, for example, foreshadowing, foregrounding, all these were the modern literary techniques which were used in the modernist literature. So the championship of the individual and the celebration of inner strength, alienation, loss, and the despair were the common themes of this movement. Means the modernist movement. The idea of reality underwent, this is very majorly I talked about, and I am very much interested about the construction of the reality. uh, Basically, reality is constructed through fiction, through sciences, and all that. So just when you are going to just label some text, just see how they are dealing with the reality. So our central question over here is that modernism deals the basically challenge the Victorian concept of our understanding of reality, and they just gave underwent to a major shift. Reality was seen as a constructed fiction, since the modernists believed that the reality is created is in the act of perceiving it. Means how we perceive some situation, that is basically the process of construction of that reality. Basically, modernists believe that the word is what we say it. Means it's the we people who construct or develop the reality. So the major writers who have been experiment with the modern techniques, they were the D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, W.B. Yeats, Sylvia Plath, F. Scott, William Faulkner, and Ernest Hemingway are the major, some notable writers who have been practicing. Even the T.S. Eliot's The Wastelands are the uh, maybe categorized under the category of modernist fiction, modernist literary text as well. So if we talk majorly modernism, basically it's the modernism lies between the period of 1900 to 1960s, and its way of it was basically a reaction against the conventional mode of reality which was being practiced between the during the Victorian period. So it talked about the authority of the criticism as well, and the simplicity of the style, and it talked about the uh, more or less of the mass progress. Means Victorian period, though it was developing, but it was not developing as sense in its that revolutionary sense. So modernism talked about that revolutionary sense against the conventional sense, and it took the reality as relative, perceived one, constructed one, while those Victorians, they somehow were tricky with that lethargic reality, and they were believe they were more like concrete in the construction of the reality. They were more specific with the construction of the reality. So this was breaking the reality, developing the multiple realities. So this is the difference between sorry in this way, modernism was a reaction against the conventional understanding and conventional patterns of dealings with the things. With this, goodbye. In our next video, we would be talking about postmodernism, and in our third video, we would be talking about the difference between modernism and the postmodernism. Hope you understand everything. Goodbye.